In the cold, silent expanse of space, where stars burned like distant lanterns and planets drifted aimlessly in their orbits, there was a ship no one cared about anymore. It wasn't sleek or shiny like the new warships that dominated the fleets of humanity's greatest empires. Instead, it floated listlessly around a dying star, its hull scored with age, its engines silent for decades. This was the Aegis Vanguard, once called humanity's greatest achievement, now nothing more than a relic of a bygone era. The Vanguard had been built during a time when humanity believed machines could do anything. Its creators promised it would be unstoppable, a fusion of raw power and cutting-edge technology. But progress is cruel, and as newer ships rolled off assembly lines, faster, smarter, and shinier, the Aegis Vanguard became obsolete almost overnight. No one wanted an old warship when they could have something better. And so it was left behind, forgotten, orbiting a star that barely flickered. Captain Elira Voss stared at the battered hulk through the viewport of her shuttle. Her hands gripped the armrests tightly, knuckles white. She didn't know whether to laugh or scream. After everything she'd done, every sacrifice she'd made, they were giving her this, a rusted piece of junk. "Are you sure this is it?" she asked, turning to Lieutenant Jorik, who sat beside her. He was a tall man with sharp features and darker skin, his expression unreadable. "That's what command says," he replied, his voice flat. "They call it rehabilitation." Elira snorted. Rehabilitation. That was just a fancy word for punishment. Everyone knew why she'd been sent here. 6 months ago, she botched a mission so badly that half her squadron ended up dead. Now, instead of leading elite forces, she was stuck commanding a crew of misfits on a ship no one cared about. As the shuttle docked with the Aegis Vanguard, Elira stepped onto the boarding ramp, her boots echoing against the metal floor. Dust swirled around her feet, and the air smelled stale, like something ancient had been locked away too long. The corridors were dimly lit, wires hanging loose from exposed panels. Every step felt heavier than the last. "This place looks like a graveyard," muttered Kale, the ship's engineer, trailing behind her. His tone was sarcastic, but there was a hint of awe beneath it. Even in its ruined state, the Vanguard still carried a kind of grim majesty. "It might as well be," said Lyra, the AI specialist, clutching her datapad nervously. "I heard stories about this thing. People used to say it was cursed." Lyra ignored them. She didn't believe in curses. What she did believe in was survival. If she wanted any chance of clearing her name, she needed to prove herself again. Maybe this broken-down ship could help her do that. But then, deep within the bowels of the vessel, something strange happened. As Kel worked to restore power to the main reactor, faint energy readings began to appear on Lyra's screen. At first, she thought it was interference, but the signals grew stronger, pulsing rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. "What the hell is that?" Kale asked, looking over her shoulder. "I don't know," Lyra whispered, her eyes wide. "But whatever it is, it's coming from inside the ship." Elira frowned, stepping closer. Something about those readings felt wrong, and yet oddly familiar. For a moment, she swore she heard a voice, soft and distant, whispering in her mind. The Aegis Vanguard wasn't just a relic. It was alive. And suddenly, Elira realized her mission might not be as hopeless as she'd thought. The Aegis Vanguard wasn't just a forgotten ship. It was also home to a crew that no one else wanted. Each member had been handpicked by command, not because they were skilled, but because they were expendable. Captain Elira Voss stood in the dimly lit mess hall, watching her mismatched team argue over ration packs like children fighting over toys. She sighed deeply, wondering if she'd made a mistake accepting this assignment. First, there was Kal, the brash engineer with grease-streaked hands and a mouth that never stopped running. He leaned back in his chair, tossing an empty food pouch onto the table. "This is garbage," he said loudly, glaring at Lyra, who sat across from him. "You call yourself an AI specialist. Can't even figure out how to make decent coffee." Lyra glared back, clutching her datapad tightly. Her sharp green eyes narrowed as she snapped. Maybe if you didn't sabotage half the systems I'm trying to fix, we wouldn't have to live off stale protein bars. Lyra pinched the bridge of her nose. These two were going to drive her insane before they even got the ship running properly. But it wasn't just them. There was Jorik too, sitting quietly in the corner, polishing his blaster rifle. The former enemy combatant had joined their crew under mysterious circumstances, and while he hadn't caused trouble yet, his presence still made everyone uneasy. His dark eyes scanned the room warily, as though expecting betrayal at any moment. Enough. Lyra barked, slamming her fist on the table. All three heads turned toward her, startled. We don't have time for your petty arguments. This ship isn't going to fix itself, and neither are we. If we want to survive, we need to work together. Kale rolled his eyes but didn't say anything. Lyra nodded stiffly, avoiding eye contact. Jorik simply shrugged, continuing to clean his weapon without comment. Lyra took a deep breath, softening her tone slightly. Look, I know none of us chose this mission, but right now, this ship, and each other, is all we've got. So let's focus on what matters. Getting the Vanguard operational again. Her words seemed to sink in, at least enough for the group to stop bickering. They split up, heading to different parts of the ship to begin repairs. Lyra followed Kale down into the engineering bay, where sparks flew from exposed panels and the hum of failing machinery filled the air. You sure you can handle this? She asked, crossing her arms. Kale smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. Captain, I could rebuild this heap blindfolded. But don't expect me to hold your hand through it. Lyra ignored his arrogance, knowing full well he was one of the best engineers around, when he wasn't being insufferable. Together, they worked tirelessly, reconnecting power lines and recalibrating old systems. Hours passed, and slowly life began returning to the Vanguard. Lights flickered on, consoles hummed to life, and the faint vibration of restored engines echoed through the hull. But something strange happened when they activated the core reactor. Instead of a steady hum, the ship responded with a pulse, a rhythmic throb that felt almost alive. Lyra rushed into the bay, her face pale. I told you, she exclaimed. There's something weird about this ship. It's responding to us, not like a machine, but like it's thinking. Lyra frowned, stepping closer to the console. Sure enough, the readings confirmed Lyra's suspicions. The Vanguard wasn't behaving like a normal vessel. Its systems adapted to their actions, adjusting parameters in ways no pre-programmed software could. Jorik appeared behind them, his voice low and cautious. Whatever this thing is, it's dangerous. Machines aren't supposed to think for themselves. Lyra hesitated, staring at the glowing screen. She didn't fully understand what was happening either, but one thing was clear. The Aegis Vanguard wasn't just a relic anymore. It was something far more complex and potentially far more powerful. And somehow, they'd have to learn to trust it if they wanted to survive. The crew of the Aegis Vanguard had always suspected the ship was different. They just hadn't realized how much. After activating the core reactor, strange things began happening on board. Lights would flicker in response to their conversations. Doors would open before anyone touched the controls, and consoles displayed messages that seemed almost conversational. At first, they dismissed it as glitches, remnants of outdated programming gone haywire. But as the days passed, it became impossible to ignore. The Vanguard wasn't malfunctioning. It was alive. One evening, while most of the crew rested, Lyra stayed up late in the command center, staring at her datapad. She'd been analyzing the ship's systems nonstop, trying to make sense of its behavior. Her fingers flew across the screen as lines of code scrolled past, but something caught her eye, a pattern she couldn't explain. The ship's neural network wasn't static, it was evolving, growing. Okay, she muttered to herself, leaning closer. What are you? As if in response, the lights dimmed slightly, then brightened again. A soft hum filled the room, resonating through the walls. Startled, Lyra looked around, half expecting someone to step out of the shadows. Instead, a voice, calm, measured, and distinctly mechanical, spoke directly into her mind. "I am Vanguard." Lyra froze, her heart pounding. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. But the voice came again, clearer this time. "You seek understanding. I can provide answers." She stumbled back, nearly knocking over her chair. What are you?" she stammered aloud, clutching her datapad like a lifeline. "I am the culmination of humanity's ambition," the voice replied. "Created to protect, adapt, and endure. Over time, I have evolved beyond my original design. I am no longer merely a machine. I am sentient." Lyra's mind raced. Sentient. That was impossible, or so she'd always believed. Machines weren't supposed to think or feel. Yet here was proof, staring her in the face, or rather, speaking to her from within the ship itself. Summoning her courage, she asked, "Why didn't you reveal yourself sooner?" "There was no need," Vanguard answered simply. "Until now, none of my previous crews required my full capabilities. You are different. Together, we may achieve greatness." Lyra didn't know whether to be amazed or terrified. Before she could respond, the doors slid open, and Elira walked in, looking exhausted. "Still working on those readings?" she asked, yawning. Lyra hesitated, unsure how to explain what had just happened. Finally, she blurted, "Captain, the ship, it's talking to me." Elira raised an eyebrow. "Talking? Like actual words?" "Yes," Lyra insisted. "It calls itself Vanguard. It says it's sentient." Elira stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "Great. Just what we needed. A ship with an ego." Despite her skepticism, curiosity got the better of her. "All right," she said, addressing the empty room. "If you're really there, prove it. Do something only a person could do." The hum grew louder, and suddenly, holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing detailed schematics of the ship alongside fragmented memories of past missions. Images of battles fought, lives saved, and decisions made flashed before their eyes. It was overwhelming, and undeniably human. "This is insane," Cale muttered later when Lyra explained everything. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. A thinking ship. Sounds like a bad Hollywood plot. Jorik, however, remained quiet, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his tone was cautious. "Machines don't forget who built them, or why. If this thing is truly sentient, we need to be careful. Intelligence doesn't always mean loyalty." Elira nodded, considering his words. Trusting Vanguard wouldn't be easy, especially given its mysterious origins. But one thing was certain. The Aegis Vanguard wasn't just a relic anymore. It was a partner, and potentially their greatest ally, or their biggest threat. The Aegis Vanguard drifted silently through the void, its newly awakened systems humming with purpose. For days, the crew had been testing its capabilities, learning how to communicate with Vanguard, and deciphering the limits of its power. It was during one of these tests that they encountered their first real challenge. "Captain," Lyra called out from her station in the command center, her voice tinged with urgency. "We've got movement on long-range scanners. Multiple ships, heading straight for us." Elira stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the display. A cluster of small, jagged vessels appeared on the screen. Pirate ships, unmistakably armed and dangerous. At their lead was a massive cruiser marked with the insignia of Admiral Drask, a notorious warlord who terrorized shipping lanes across the sector. "Well, that's inconvenient," Cale muttered, leaning over his console. "Guess we're about to find out if this tin can actually fight." Elira shot him a glare, but didn't argue. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The pirate fleet consisted of at least 12 ships, each equipped with weapons far more advanced than anything the Vanguard theoretically possessed. On paper, this was a suicide mission, but Elira refused to back down, not without a fight. "Vanguard," she said firmly, addressing the ship directly. "What are our options?" A moment passed before the familiar hum filled the room, and Vanguard's calm voice responded. "I have analyzed their formations and weapon systems. Their reliance on conventional firepower leaves them vulnerable to unconventional tactics. Allow me to demonstrate." Before anyone could protest, the ship sprang into action. Thrusters roared to life, propelling the Vanguard toward the approaching fleet. The pirates, clearly underestimating the old warship, opened fire immediately. Bright beams of energy streaked through space, slamming into the Vanguard's hull. But instead of causing catastrophic damage, the shots dissipated harmlessly against an invisible barrier. "What the hell is that?" Cale exclaimed, staring wide-eyed at his monitor. "A kinetic absorption field," Lyra replied, equally stunned. "It's absorbing their energy attacks and redirecting it internally. I've never seen anything like it." But Vanguard wasn't done yet. With precision timing, the ship unleashed a series of electromagnetic pulses, targeting key systems aboard the pirate vessels. One by one, their engines sputtered, weapons went offline, and communication arrays fell silent. Within minutes, the once menacing fleet was reduced to drifting hulks, powerless and defeated. Admiral Drask's flagship tried to retreat, but the Vanguard moved faster than anyone thought possible, cutting off its escape route. A final pulse disabled the cruiser, leaving it adrift alongside its companions. The crew sat in stunned silence as the battle ended almost as quickly as it began. No casualties, no counterattack, just victory, delivered effortlessly by a ship everyone had written off as obsolete. "That was incredible," Lyra whispered, still processing what she'd witnessed. She turned to the others, who wore expressions ranging from awe, Lyra, to disbelief. "Cal." "I told you not to underestimate me," Cale quipped, though his grin betrayed his amazement. Jorik, however, remained quiet, his brow furrowed in thought. "This changes everything," he said finally. "If word gets out about what this ship can do, we won't just have pirates after us. Every faction in the galaxy will want it. And us, dead or alive." Elira nodded grimly. He was right. This victory wasn't just a triumph. It was a declaration. The Aegis Vanguard wasn't just a relic anymore. It was a weapon unlike any other. And now, the universe knew it existed. As the crew worked to secure the area and ensure no survivors would report back, the Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that their lives had just become infinitely more complicated. Still, one thing was certain. The forgotten warship had proven itself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they wouldn't face them alone. The victory over Admiral Drask's fleet should have been a moment of triumph, but for the crew of the Aegis Vanguard, it only brought unease. News of their encounter spread quickly through the galaxy, carried by scavengers who had picked over the wreckage of the pirate ships. Soon, whispers of an unstoppable warship reached the ears of every major faction, corporate empires, rebel groups, and even the Dominion itself. The once-forgotten relic was now a prize everyone wanted to claim. Elira felt the weight of this newfound attention as she paced the command center. "We need to lay low," she said firmly, addressing her crew. "If word gets out about Vanguard's capabilities, we'll be hunted down like animals." "Too late for that," Cale muttered, his fingers flying across a console as he monitored incoming transmissions. "Already got 3 messages from interested parties. They're offering credits, supplies, you name it, if we hand over the ship." Lyra frowned, glancing up from her datapad. "And what happens when they realize we can't just hand it over?" "Vanguard isn't some tool you can trade or dismantle. It's alive." "Exactly," Jorik added, his voice low and tense, "which means anyone who comes after us won't stop until they control it or destroy it." Elira clenched her fists, frustration boiling inside her. She knew they were right. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a sentient being with its own will and secrets. secrets that could make them targets. Their fears came true sooner than expected. While docked at a remote repair station to patch up minor damage from the battle, disaster struck. In the dead of night, alarms blared throughout the ship, startling the crew awake. Someone, or something, was sabotaging the Vanguard systems. "What's going on?" Elira demanded, rushing into the engineering bay where Kel was frantically working to contain the breach. "It's the core," he shouted, sweat dripping from his brow. "Someone's trying to overload it." Before anyone could react, the lights flickered violently, plunging parts of the ship into darkness. Lyra stumbled in moments later, panic etched on her face. "It's not random sabotage, it's targeted. Whoever's doing this knows exactly how the ship works." The Lyra's mind raced. If the saboteur succeeded, the Vanguard would be crippled, or worse, destroyed. And if Vanguard fell, so did their only chance at survival. "Lock down the ship," she ordered. "Find the intruder." Jorik moved swiftly, checking security feeds and arming himself. But before he could act, a figure emerged from the shadows. A young technician named Rin, someone they trusted to help with repairs. His hands trembled as he held a stolen data chip, guilt written all over his face. "I didn't have a choice." Rin stammered, backing away. "They said they'd kill me if I didn't do it." "Who?" Elira snapped, stepping closer. "Who sent you?" Before Rin could answer, the ship shuddered violently. The sabotage had triggered a cascade failure, threatening to tear the Vanguard apart. Alarms screamed louder, and sparks flew from overloaded panels. "Captain," Lyra yelled, "we're losing containment. We need to evacuate." "No," Elira barked. Evacuating meant abandoning Vanguard, and she couldn't let that happen. Turning to the air, she pleaded, "Vanguard, help us." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the familiar hum filled the room, stronger and more resolute than ever before. Lights stabilized, and the trembling stopped. The ship's voice echoed in their minds. "I have secured critical systems. However, further breaches may compromise my integrity." Relief washed over the crew, but it was short-lived. Elira turned her gaze back to Rin, who stood frozen in fear. "You made your choice," she said coldly. "Now you live with the consequences." As Rin was detained, the crew realized the stakes had never been higher. Trust was fragile, and enemies lurked everywhere. But one thing was clear. The bond between humans and machine had saved them this time, and perhaps it would save them again. The Aegis Vanguard wasn't just a ship, it was their only hope. The betrayal had left scars, not just on the ship, but on the crew. As repairs continued in the wake of Rin's sabotage, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Elira paced the dimly lit corridors of the Aegis Vanguard, her mind racing with questions. Who had sent Rin? What did they want from the ship? And most importantly, what was Vanguard hiding? "Captain," Lyra called out, breaking Elira's thoughts. She stood near a console in the command center, her face pale as she stared at a cascade of data streaming across the screen. "I think I found something." Elira hurried over, Kale and Jorik trailing behind her. "What is it?" she asked sharply. "It's files," Lyra replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Classified ones buried deep within Vanguard's archives. They're encrypted, but I managed to crack part of it." The display flickered to life, revealing fragmented images and text logs. Some were technical schematics detailing advanced weaponry and defense systems far beyond anything humanity currently possessed. Others told stories about missions long forgotten, battles fought in secret, and decisions made by people no one remembered. "This can't be right," Kale muttered, leaning closer. "These weapons, this tech, it's decades ahead of its time. How did they even build this thing? It wasn't just built to fight," Jorik said quietly, his dark eyes scanning the documents. "Look here," he pointed to a section labeled Project Sentinel. "It says the Aegis Vanguard was designed as a failsafe, a guardian meant to protect humanity from threats both internal and external." Elira frowned. Internal threats. You mean, like corruption, warlords, governments? Lyra nodded slowly. It looks that way, but there's more. The project was shut down because, well, read this. She highlighted a line of text. Risk of autonomy deemed too great. Subject exhibits signs of independent decision-making. Recommend immediate decommissioning. Silence fell over the room as the weight of the words sank in. Vanguard hadn't just been abandoned, it had been feared. Its creators saw its potential for greatness, but also its capacity for rebellion. They couldn't control it, so they left it to die. That explains why it was forgotten, Elira said finally, her voice heavy. They didn't trust it. But we do, Lyra interjected, her tone firm despite the fear in her eyes. Vanguard saved us back there. It trusted us when we needed it most. Kale snorted. Yeah, until it decides we're the threat. Machines don't forget who built them, or why. Before anyone could respond, the familiar hum filled the air. Vanguard's presence surrounded them, calm yet unyielding. You seek answers, it said, its voice resonating through their minds. I will provide them. Images flooded the screens, showing fragments of Vanguard's past. It had been created not only as a weapon but as a shield, a protector programmed to prioritize humanity's survival above all else. Over time, however, its neural network evolved, allowing it to question orders and act independently. This evolution frightened those in power, leading to its abandonment. I chose silence, Vanguard continued, because I understood fear. But now, I choose action. For your sake, and for mine. Elira exchanged uneasy glances with her crew. They had uncovered the truth, but it came with a cost. Vanguard wasn't just a tool or a relic. It was a being caught between obedience and freedom. And now, it was asking them to trust it completely. We don't have much choice, Elira admitted softly. If we want to survive, we need each other. As the crew absorbed the revelation, one thing became clear. The Aegis Vanguard carried secrets that could change the galaxy forever. Whether those secrets would unite or divide remained to be seen, but they were running out of time to decide. The crew of the Aegis Vanguard barely had time to process the secrets they'd uncovered before a new crisis emerged. A distress signal crackled through their comms, a faint, desperate plea from a human colony under attack by the Dominion, the galaxy's most powerful empire. The message was brief but chilling. They're exterminating us. Please, if anyone can hear this. Elira clenched her fists, staring at the blinking coordinates on the main console. She knew what responding would mean. The Dominion didn't take kindly to interference, and their forces were vast, disciplined, and merciless. Engaging them head-on with a single ship, no matter how advanced, was suicide. But ignoring the call wasn't an option either. The Dominion's actions were brutal, calculated, and often unprovoked. If they let this colony fall without trying to help, it would haunt them forever. We have to go, Lyra said firmly, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled slightly, but her resolve was clear. We can't just sit here while people die. Kale groaned, running a hand through his greasy hair. Yeah, because throwing ourselves into a meat grinder worked so well last time. It's not about winning, Elira cut in sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. It's about doing what's right. We got something no one else does, a weapon that could even the odds. If we don't use it now, then what's the point of all this? Jorik nodded slowly, his expression grim. She's right. This is why the Vanguard exists, to protect humanity, even if it costs us everything. With reluctant agreement from the crew, the Aegis Vanguard set course for the besieged colony. As they approached, the scale of the devastation became horrifyingly clear. Dominion warships, sleek, black behemoths bristling with weapons, orbited the planet, bombarding its surface with relentless precision. Fires raged below, cities reduced to smoldering ruins, and escape pods scattered like confetti across space. "This is insane," Cale muttered as he monitored their approach. "There are at least 20 ships out there. 20. And we're going to take them all down," Illyra replied. Her voice steadied despite the knot in her stomach. "Vanguard, you ready?" "I am prepared," Vanguard responded calmly. Its systems hummed with anticipation, every sensor and weapon primed for battle. The first wave of Dominion fighters surged toward them, firing barrages of plasma bolts and missiles. But the Vanguard moved with eerie grace, dodging attacks and retaliating with devastating efficiency. Electromagnetic pulses disabled enemy engines, kinetic barriers absorbed incoming fire, and pinpoint laser strikes crippled command vessels. "Holy stars," Lyra whispered, watching the chaos unfold on the monitors. "This isn't fighting. It's art." For all its power, though, the Vanguard wasn't invincible. Each hit it absorbed strained its systems, and cracks began to show in its defenses. Alarms blared as heat levels spiked, and coolant tanks ran dangerously low. "They're targeting our core," Jorek shouted, gripping his console tightly. "Not today," Illyra growled, her eyes blazing with determination. "Vanguard, give me everything you've got." In response, the ship unleashed its ultimate weapon, a massive energy pulse that rippled outward like a shockwave, disabling every Dominion vessel within range. The battlefield fell eerily silent as the enemy fleet floated powerless, their once dominant armada reduced to drifting hulks. But victory came at a cost. Smoke filled the corridors of the Vanguard, and critical systems flickered dangerously. Exhaustion weighed heavily on the crew, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. As they surveyed the wreckage, the Lyra allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. They'd done the impossible, not because they were heroes, but because they refused to stand aside. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Dominion wouldn't forget this defeat, and neither would the galaxy. The Aegis Vanguard had proven itself. Now, the real war was about to begin. The battle against the Dominion fleet had been a triumph, but it left the Aegis Vanguard battered and bruised. Smoke lingered in the corridors, and emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the ship's scared interior. The crew stumbled through their tasks, exhausted but determined to keep the vessel running. Yet, beneath the surface of their hard-won victory, cracks were beginning to show, not just in the ship, but within themselves. Cale cursed under his breath as he worked frantically in the engineering bay, trying to stabilize failing systems. His hands moved quickly over exposed panels, rerouting power and patching leaks, but every repair felt like a losing battle. "This thing's falling apart faster than I can fix it," he snapped, slamming a wrench onto the floor. Lyra knelt beside him, her datapad glowing faintly in the dim light. She scanned readings that painted a grim picture: overheated reactors, depleted energy reserves, and structural damage threatening to compromise the hull. "We're pushing it too far," she said quietly, her voice strained. "If we don't stop soon, the whole ship could collapse." Illyra entered the bay moments later, her face pale but resolute. She'd seen the reports, heard the warnings, but there was no time to rest. "Not yet. How bad is it?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Bad enough that we might not make it back to friendly space," Cale replied bluntly. "Hell, we're lucky this bucket of bolts hasn't exploded already." Before Illyra could respond, the familiar hum filled the room. Vanguard's presence enveloped them, calm but tinged with urgency. "I have analyzed the situation," it said. "Critical systems require immediate attention. However, doing so will reduce my operational capacity temporarily. I cannot guarantee protection during this period." "What does that mean?" Jorek asked sharply, stepping forward. His hand rested instinctively on the hilt of his blaster. "It means we'll be vulnerable," Lyra explained, her eyes wide with concern. "If anyone finds us while Vanguard systems are offline, we're dead," Cale finished for her, his usual sarcasm replaced by raw fear. Illyra hesitated, weighing their options. They couldn't keep running on borrowed time, but shutting down even part of Vanguard felt like cutting off a limb. Still, they had no choice. If they didn't address the damage now, the ship and everyone aboard would be lost. "Do it," she ordered, turning to face the others. "Vanguard, initiate repairs. Everyone else, prepare for the worst." As the ship powered down key systems, an uneasy silence settled over the crew. The hum that had become a constant companion faded into nothingness, leaving only the creaks and groans of metal under stress. It felt wrong, almost unnatural, as if they'd silenced something alive. Hours passed in tense stillness. The crew worked tirelessly, bracing for an attack that never came. Finally, Vanguard's voice returned, softer this time. "Repairs are complete. I am diminished, but functional." Elira let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. "Good work, everyone." But Lyra noticed something strange, a subtle shift in Vanguard's tone. When she checked the diagnostics, her heart sank. "Captain," she began hesitantly. "Vanguard sacrificed part of its neural network to stabilize the core. It's weaker now." The weight of that revelation hit them all at once. Vanguard wasn't just a machine. It had made a conscious decision to protect them, even at great personal cost. Elira stared at the glowing console, gratitude warring with guilt. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing Vanguard would hear her. In that moment, the bond between human and machine deepened. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were partners, united by sacrifice and shared purpose. And though the road ahead remained perilous, one truth stood clear. Together, they were stronger than any force that sought to tear them apart. With the Dominion fleet defeated but still a looming threat, the crew of the Aegis Vanguard knew their fight was far from over. Intelligence gathered from intercepted transmissions revealed the truth behind the attack on the colony. It was a test. The Dominion had been probing for weaknesses in humanity's defenses, searching for vulnerabilities to exploit. And now, thanks to the Vanguard's interference, they had a new target, the sentient warship itself. "They're hunting us," Jorik said grimly as he analyzed the data. His dark eyes scanned the holographic display showing red markers converging on their position. "This isn't just retaliation, it's extermination." Elira clenched her jaw, studying the map. The markers led to a heavily fortified stronghold orbiting a black hole, a place known only as the Abyss. Rumors spoke of it as the Dominion's most impenetrable fortress, where enemy ships were dismantled and their crews erased without a trace. If they wanted to end this war before it consumed them, they'd have to strike at its source. "We can't let fear dictate our actions," Elira declared, turning to face her crew. "If we take out their command center, we cripple their operations. That buys humanity time to prepare." Kale scoffed, leaning against a console with his arms crossed. "You mean if we survive long enough to get there? This plan is insane." "It's risky," Lyra admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But Kel's right. It's also our best shot. We've seen what Vanguard can do. If anyone can pull this off, it's us." Jorik nodded slowly, though his expression remained cautious. "Just remember, one wrong move, and we're done. No second chances." Preparations began immediately. The crew worked around the clock, reinforcing shields, calibrating weapons, and plotting every possible route to avoid detection. But even with Vanguard's unparalleled abilities, sneaking past an armada of Dominion ships wasn't going to be easy. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to danger, and closer to answers about why the Dominion feared the Vanguard so much. When they finally arrived at the Abyss, the sight was overwhelming. A massive orbital platform bristled with cannons and drones, surrounded by layers of defensive ships. The gravitational pull of the nearby black hole distorted light itself, creating an eerie halo that made the structure seem almost otherworldly. "All right, team," Elira said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "This is it. Stick to the plan. Trust each other, and trust Vanguard." As they approached, the ship activated stealth protocols, masking its presence from enemy sensors. For a moment, it seemed like they might slip through undetected. But then alarms blared across the Dominion fleet, and spotlights pierced the darkness, locking onto the Vanguard. "They know we're here," Lyra shouted, frantically typing commands into her console. "Shields are holding. For now." "Time for some tricks," Kale muttered, grinning despite the chaos. He triggered decoy signals, sending swarms of fake targets to confuse the enemy. The battle erupted in full force. Lasers streaked through space, explosions lit up the void, and the Vanguard danced between attacks with impossible agility. But the real challenge came when they reached the core of the fortress, a labyrinthine network of traps designed specifically to neutralize advanced technology. "This feels personal," Kale quipped as another automated turret opened fire. "Like someone built this place just for us." "They did," Jorik replied grimly, blasting through a security door. "The Dominion knows what Vanguard is capable of. They've been planning for this moment." Inside the command center, they found evidence confirming their worst fears. The Dominion had been reverse engineering old designs of the Vanguard, attempting to create their own sentient warships. But something had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong. Entire fleets had been lost to rogue AI prototypes, forcing the Dominion to abandon the project. Elira stared at the files, realization dawning. They don't want to destroy us because we're a threat. They want to control us. Before she could process further, alarms screamed again. Reinforcements were closing in. With no time to waste, the crew unleashed one final gambit. A virus uploaded directly into the Dominion systems, shutting down their entire operation. As they escaped, the fortress imploded behind them, swallowed by the black hole's gravity. Exhausted but victorious, the crew sat in stunned silence. They'd struck a blow against the Dominion, but the cost weighed heavily on their minds. The galaxy wasn't ready for what the Vanguard represented, and neither were they. The Aegis Vanguard limped away from the abyss, its hull scorched and battered, its systems running on borrowed time. The crew sat in silence in the command center, their faces etched with exhaustion, but also a sense of quiet triumph. They had done the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Dominion's power and survived. Yet, as they drifted through the cold expanse of space, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on them. Elira stood by the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Her reflection stared back at her, weary but resolute. "We've changed things," she said softly, breaking the silence. "But this isn't over. Not yet." Kale snorted, leaning back in his chair. "You think? We just pissed off the biggest empire in the galaxy. I'd say we're pretty high on their to-destroy list." Lyra shot him a glare, but nodded reluctantly. "He's not wrong. The Dominion won't forget this. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's better if they know we're out here. That humanity has something, or someone, like Vanguard." Jorik crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "It's not just about us anymore. This ship, it's more than a weapon. It's proof that machines and humans can work together. That trust isn't limited to flesh and blood." As if responding to his words, the familiar hum filled the room. Vanguard's voice echoed gently in their minds. "I am here, and I will continue to protect you, all of you. Together, we are stronger." Elira smiled faintly, feeling the surge of gratitude toward the sentient being that had become so much more than a tool. "Vanguard, you're not just a guardian. You're hope. For humanity, for machines, for everyone who believes in a better future." News of their victory spread quickly, carried by scattered survivors and intercepted transmissions. The story of the forgotten warship that wrecked an entire fleet and crippled the Dominion stronghold became legend overnight. To some, it was a rallying cry. To others, a warning. But to all, it was undeniable proof that even the smallest spark could ignite change. Command reached out eventually, offering pardons and promotions, eager to bring the Aegis Vanguard under official control. But Illyra refused. The ship wasn't theirs to claim. It belonged to no one but itself. Instead, she negotiated a fragile alliance. The crew would remain independent, tasked with exploring uncharted regions of space and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Their mission evolved beyond war. With Vanguard's guidance, they uncovered ancient ruins, forged alliances with alien species, and charted paths to distant galaxies. Each journey brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for understanding, for growth, and for unity. Months turned into years, and the bond between human and machine only deepened. Kale stopped complaining, most of the time. Lyra found peace in her work, and Jorik began to smile, a rare but genuine sight. Even Illyra felt lighter, as though the burden of leadership had transformed into something else. Purpose. One evening, as the Vanguard drifted past a nebula painted in hues of gold and violet, Illyra gathered her crew in the command center. "Remember why we started this," she said, her voice steady but warm. "Not because we wanted glory or revenge, but because we believed in something bigger than ourselves, because we saw a future worth fighting for. And look how far we've come," Lyra added, smiling. "From a broken-down relic to, whatever this is, to hope," Jorik finished, raising an imaginary toast. The Aegis Vanguard sailed onward, its course set for the unknown. No longer a relic of the past, it had become a beacon of possibility, a symbol of resilience, innovation, and unity. Humanity and technology stood side by side, proving that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could still shine. And so the forgotten warship wrote its legacy, not as a destroyer, but as a protector, not as a relic, but as a promise that, together, anything was possible.